motion on the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? Okay, thank you. Is there any public comment at this time?
No, thank you.
All right, so our first item is a status update on the portrait of a graduate.
We are in the middle of a few more refinements. We've had some scheduling difficulties with different folks trying to get people together to take a look at it to see how it's been edited since the last time. And I think we will have something ready next month or definitely by March to present to the subcommittee.
Any questions for anyone on that?
No, that's when we'll get the next peek at it. That's when we'll get the next peek at it.
We've gotten a lot of good feedback.
We have gotten a
Since,
lot of good
it's,
feedback. It's just been, we've got people who are sick, we're trying to get people together, it's been challenging. You know.
All right then, let's go on to, there's rumor that we actually have our.
Oh, we have data, so let me tell a little story. So I was at a meeting at the beginning of January, and literally January 3rd, and we were talking about the embargoed data. And don't you know that the state sort of released it without emailing anybody at the district? So we were all kind of taken aback. I was at a meeting in Concord. So everybody was kind of going, oh, that's nice for them to tell us. So we have data. There will be a huge piece in the annual report that I just submitted to Phyllis, and she's working on getting that together. That includes some of this as well as the agreed upon targeted outcomes that we talked about last time. So it's going to be the same data that was discussed in last year's annual report. We're going to look at it again for this year, where we stand, and it's going to include information about test scores for Fountas and Pinnell benchmark reading assessment, the statewide assessment that we give in New Hampshire, SAT scores, PSAT scores, and you'll be able to take a look at that, and as well as some of the graduation rates. It's going to have the attendance data in there, so all the same information that was discussed last time. And then we also have the assessment scores chart that we have been historically sharing. Thanks, Brian.
Yeah.
We've been historically sharing this, so this is updated to include the most recent data. It's just a one page. And did a little, did a little color change to this so that it doesn't get confused with stuff that you might have received last year. English language arts is all in the blue area, math is all in the red area, and science is in the green area. The yellow highlights represent the higher scores going back now to the year 2015, 2016. For ease of reading and being able to condense this to one page, I collapsed the kindergarten to grade 2 because we don't give performance assessments except for local ones, so I collapsed that, all those years together, as well as grade 12, so that you could see grades 3 through 11 more easily.
So we have room to improve it still.
We do have room to improve, clearly. Yep. Just to point out again, the numbers listed in the New Hampshire column are the percentages in the state of students scoring 3 or 4, which is a proficient or above. The SRSD column is our score.
Yeah, but to your point, everywhere room to improve for sure. You know, and that's this chart is helpful for us because it shows kind of the progression through the grades. We can look at a specific grade level and how that grade level does over time, but also we can kind of follow the kids and see how the growth is there or not there for different grade levels and different content areas. You just have to kind of follow the math backwards to do that, right? This year's 10th graders were last year's 9th graders, so on and so forth. But it's definitely, you know, all of this data comes into play when we're looking at what sorts of plans we're putting in place moving forward, right? So, for example, good segue, Tom coming in. Evening. All the intervention efforts that we've been putting in place, what we've been talking about putting in place, we've started putting in place at the high school. They're not gonna show up in any of the data yet, right? So we added a math intervention person this year. That work is going well. She's unpacking things. She's starting to work with kids, but we're not seeing any movement in scores, obviously. That's gonna take a little bit of time to do so. And even how we're using her is evolving because we've not had a position like that. So where we've got her integrated in different spaces, we're also talking about some ways that we can maybe expand or use her in a little bit more of an efficient manner next year, just as we get more comfortable with the position. But it plays into a lot of the decisions that we make.
Is she working with children at all?
Yes, yep, she spends the day working with children. So her focus right now is 9th and 10th graders. And the focus is what we would call kids who are on the bubble. Kids who need just a little bit more work to get them over into the proficient range. So she's using a lot of different data points in order to determine which kids she needs to work with. NWEA is probably the biggest one that she uses, simply because we have the most longevity with that data, and that's, nationally normed. So she meets with kids. It could be short-term or long-term situations. So she puts together individual programs for kids and then finds time to be able to work with the kids. So one of them might be during our flex period that we have during the day, and the kids might get assigned there to work with her. For some of our kids, they might have an assisted study hall, and that's a time when she can pull them out and work with them. And then for some of the kids, she has arrangements with the math teachers that when they're working in their math classroom, not all of that time is spent doing direct instruction. Some of it is spent doing independent practice while the teacher's there to support, and so then they're able to come out and meet with her then. I would say, and I check in with her probably weekly, at least weekly, if not a couple times a week. Anytime I go in the classroom, she's probably got on average 5 or 6 students in that room. And you might walk in it's about classroom this size. It would be typical to walk in and she's sitting at a table like this with 2 or 3 students and they're working on one thing. There might be 2 or 3 kids spread out at desks working independently on something, and there might be another group in the back here. There's a whole bunch of colored binders in her room, and you walk in, every binder is for an individual student that she's working with, and they've got progress goals in there. So it's a good model. She's got a skill set that we haven't had available to us, which is good. But like I said, it's the first year of having her, and even as she's working, we're coming to the realization, this is great, but we can already see some adjustments we could make next year to make even more efficient use of her time with kids. So we're growing into it for sure. Well,
Could we just kind of, just at least for the camera, like walk through the data just a little bit? So in 3rd grade, this past year.
18-19 for English language arts, 67% of students scored a proficient or above.
And that's up from 62 the previous year.
Right. And for math, 68%, which is way up from last year was 39%.
And those are both, this last year's scores were both above the New Hampshire state average.
Yep.
52 and 57. Okay.
Yep. 4th grade was a 46 below the New Hampshire average and of 55, and math 65 above the New Hampshire average of 52.
But both of those scores were
Improvements over the previous year.
Depending, I guess, on how you want
Right.
to look at it. Because
Right.
I know you'd like to look at each class as they move forward. I'm just looking at 3rd grade,
Yeah.
one year to
Yep.
the next.
yeah, which is also,
Still.
but that's also some way, sometimes you want to look at the data that way because depending on the makeup of the teachers and the teams, that talks to the instruction that's happening and how the teachers are using their time, right? Even though you have different kids. That's why it's good to be able to look at the data both ways.
Grade 5 was a 61% scoring proficient, which was above the state average of 57. for ELA. For math, 48%, which was above the state average of 44. We also have a science score this year, or this past year for grade 5, 31%, the state average was 38. So there's been some movement about where science is getting tested, and the state feels right now it's gonna be grades 5 and 8 going forward. Grade 6, 63 for ELA, above the state average of 56. Grade math, 63 for mathematics, which was above the state average of 47. Grade 7, 80 for English language arts, above the state average of 56. Math was a 70, above the state average of 47. 8th grade, 65, above the state average of 53. Math, 45, which was equal to, right on the state average of the 45. For science for grade 8, 59, above the state average of 41. Grade 9 was a 42. We don't have state averages for that because the state of New Hampshire no longer collects data in grades 9 and 10. For math, it was a 9. Grade 10, English language arts 21, mathematics 17, and grade 11 was the SAT at 50, which was below the state average of 69, and 27 for math, below the state average of 47.
Thank you. Okay, go ahead. Other questions?
Yeah. So it looks like in the most recent time frames, 18, 19, particularly in the high school, prior to 8th grade and below, we are above or at the New Hampshire averages. 9th, 10th, and 11th grade, where there's a comparative points, with the exception of 16, 17, the last couple of years, we've been not doing so well against the state. The math particularly, 9th, 10th, 11th is the worst in 4 years. Do we have any feeling for why that might be? Why are we the worst in 4 years?
Compared to our own scores.
Right, compared to our own,
To
compared to
previous
our own
years.
scores.
The scores have decreased.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm gonna go back to the intervention piece. I mean, this is why I think that this was a focus for us this past year in looking at how we're gonna approach intervention and how we're gonna approach working with some of our kids who are on the bubble. We have kids, we're struggling to meet their needs and their skills right now with the instruction that we have. This is why there's emphasis right now on this.
And it also goes to some of the cascading skills that come out of middle school, where the rigor does pick up in grades 9, 10, and 11 as far as more application of some of the things that they might have had an introduction to in middle school. And even though for the middle school, they might be hitting where that benchmark is because there's less information that they're being tested on, once you ramp up that rigor, if we don't also make sure that they're backfilling some of the information they might be missing, those gaps get bigger. And so you get to see a more pronounced development as you get into high school. So we know that the intervention program that we're gonna be putting in place next year from grades K all the way up through 8 are gonna help with all of that stuff. Because you know yourself, if you have bricks missing in your foundation and you continue to let those bricks be missing, suddenly the stress is on other bricks and you start losing support. So we're definitely looking at that. We've been looking at some of our other test data as far as NWEA. Those pieces of information that we're getting give us a starting point. We're looking at, as part of our intervention program going forward, bringing on an additional component of testing that we could use with the students to help more prescriptively identify what it is that they need, instead of just knowing that in general they're having issues with number sense. We can better identify and pinpoint where those issues are in that number sense. Is it all numbers? Is it that they're struggling with place value? Are they struggling with adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing? What is it that they're really struggling with? And so by adding this component of assessment in, which would be something that would be given on an ongoing basis instead of just at the beginning of the year or at certain points in the year, we'll be able to keep more on top of where are they getting closer to where they need to be, instead of us just sort of taking a shot at what they might need.
Do we have 4th and 8th grade PACE data sets? I see we've got SBAC and NHSAS listed, but do we have the PACE data sets also?
Those grades are not, so for grades 3 through 8, the state collects assessment data from school districts. It determines for us what is getting tested in what grade level. So in 8th grade, the state says you are gonna do the statewide assessment, the SAS. In grade 7, it says you will do PACE. So putting them through both types of testing is not necessary from the state's perspective. Students do at all grade levels have opportunities to do performance assessments, which is what PACE stands for, Performance Assessment for Competency Education. But it's different measures that, when calibrated together and when they look at them at more of a larger scale, the tests are actually measuring similarly, and they're giving us data that regardless of the type of test, you're going to receive information that's similar. It's just the format that's different for the student.
It just seemed to me, looking at data, that if we have, it begs a question for the 4th and the 8th grade year, how comparable is that data set versus the PACE data sets? Whereas if you had PACE data sets also, which the state doesn't bar you from doing both, I can't imagine, you'd at least have the consistency of PACE all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
And then you'd have the comparative point in 4th and 8th grades to say PACE versus another measure and see how those are.
And we do
You
have
don't really
that.
have that here.
We do have that with the NWEA, that's our beginning of the year assessment data, which you receive that score for your child at the beginning of the year, but we don't test them multiple times, which is what I'm talking about with this other piece of assessment that's part of the suite of testing that NWEA offers, is this other component that we're going to be bringing in there, so that it's something that's also continuous. Because looking at how students are doing in September gives you an idea of where they're starting. And that's a longer test, it takes more time, and more time testing means you're out of the class getting instruction. Where this other component is more of a quick shot, kind of maybe half-hour test that you can give the students. You get that data right away, and you can start to address that prescriptively. But a good grade to look at is grade 4, where you've got PACE in English Language Arts, but the statewide assessment in mathematics. So you've got 2 different kinds of tests going on there at the same time.
I just suggested it would be beneficial to have in 4th grade math also PACE, so you can see.
Yep.
I have PACE in 3rd, PACE in 4th, PACE in 5th,
Yep.
6th, 7th.
Yep.
I also get PACE in 8th, and then I got PACE all the way down until the final SAT.
We agree with you, that was sort of the original design of what PACE was supposed to be, but I think when the state was able to make agreements with the feds on what that waiver was gonna look like, there was some concessions made, I guess, that some of those years were gonna be different assessments.
Well, I think it's good to have different assessments, you got a different measure to
Yep.
compare it against.
Right.
I would just tend to do both, and then I can get my
Right.
consistency.
We have to make there
I
is
don't
no
think there
PACE
is one,
task.
that's the point, is that when the state
Yeah.
made the agreement with the feds, they created a PACE assessment and then they used the other assessment on those years.
Right,
So it's not an unwillingness on our part to give both assessments.
right.
The problem is that there isn't an assessment those years for PACE.
We could make our own, but it would just be our assessment, it
Right,
wouldn't
it wouldn't
be
be
a.
the state.
It wouldn't be the
necessarily
state.
be consistent with.
Exactly.
PACE creation.
Correct.
Right.
I mean, it could be in the sense that we could make it in the same way, but it's not, it's not gonna be something that you're gonna be able to compare and has that validity where it's being used in other schools as well.
Can you look into that though, just to make sure that we're right?
We are, we're
Yeah,
right.
okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, we definitely are.
We're
with
right,
that.
which is where you get into
Didn't want-
some of the local performance assessments. We use performance assessments throughout, even non-tested, like social studies. You don't see social studies on here at all, but students will do performance assessments in social studies, but that's not something that is one of the designated, collectible assessment points by the government.
I mean,
It's a mess.
I've always been concerned about our 8th grade to 9th grade. I think that's where, to me, that's a pivotal year where I think we lose a lot of ground with our kids, and that's something where I think we need to put most of our focus. And I think you can even see it in this chart, if I'm reading this right, Patty.
Yep.
Right? So I can go back to 8th grade, 15-16 math data.
Yep.
And that's SBAC.
Yep.
Where our kids were above the state,
Yep.
right? 52 to 47. Now you jump down to the 9th grade and you look at those same kids, 'cause
Yep.
now we've added in more kids from another school, but are going to be 16-17 year, right?
Yep.
28 to 38.
Yep.
Those same kids will now in 17 and 18 be at 34. And then in 11th grade, we can
27.
see that's the 27-47 number that's at the bottom, right? So you can look that way too, but that, I think, if you were to go back and look, that tends to be a trend that we see a lot, is that 8th grade to 9th grade connection that I think we lose. And so again, one of our other efforts is to try to work with our 8th grade teachers, collaborating with the high school teachers more, and especially between both of the sending schools.
Why wouldn't you incorporate their scores from Fremont into these, so you have apples and apples?
We don't get their data
Why not?
because they don't share the data.
Then why are you counting their kids in our scores?
Well, then there are kids in
There are kids in 9th grade, that's
They're
the
not
problem.
our kids in 8th grade.
We have no
That's the
control
problem.
over.
So it's
instruction.
a tricky, slippery slope.
Have we requested and they've denied?
Isn't that public information even from them?
Not kid by kid.
No.
All right, you could do grade by grade and incorporate that in here, can't you?
I think that we could.
You see what I'm
incorporate-
saying?
No, I know what you mean.
Okay.
Yeah, I know what you mean. You could
Because
do,
maybe our kids wouldn't fare so badly.
well, my point,
You should know.
my point is not to try to say one school's better than the other.
Right,
My point is to say we've got an issue, I think, if we're looking for target areas of where can we make the biggest gains, I think definitely looking at what happens between 8th grade and 9th grade over that, 18-month period in the middle of that window, I think is really huge.
I know, but when our scores look like they're in the toilet, they might not be as bad as this reflects.
So,
All I'm
I know what-
saying.
So let me just speak to that a little bit. When I first arrived, I had Michael Tamel pull out the Fremont students to see what the difference was. So in high school, we actually did the reverse of what you're saying. We pulled out the Fremont students and just looked at our kids
Yeah.
that we taught from K to 12. Fremont students actually made our scores better.
Well, that's interesting.
I mean, if you look at this, and you always get in trouble looking at data and generalizing, but certainly we run against the wall 8th to 9th.
Yep.
But it also
Yep.
suggests that we're going happy on our way and not thinking that there's a wall coming all through the grade levels. It talks to the robustness of the grade level. It talks to what we've also been talking about in terms of everyday math and what the foundationals are, because it says we're chugging along and we're not doing too bad there in 3 to 3rd grade to 8th grade, and we're thinking that, hey, we're proficient, we're well, then we get to the next level and we run smack into a wall, and we appear to not only hit the wall, but then lose as we go on, as people say, oh, forget this, I just don't seem to be
And then-
prepared whatsoever.
Right.
And forget it.
And that is precisely why we're going toward the RTI model. I think,
Right.
we sent a number of people to the RTI Institute back in December to figure out what we need to do going into the reorganization, to make
RTI
sure-
standing for.
response to intervention for our
Right.
interventionist positions. So I
Just wanna
think,
make sure that-
yep, so I'm sure that, some of that training will carry over. We wanna make sure that we've got the right pieces in place. We wanna make sure we've got the right assessments in place. We've got the right instruction in place. We've got, the curriculum is getting aligned, so we're also still looking at the math. That's one of the things that, and I brought gifts for the committee members. This is the book that I was mentioning last time, so that you've got a book now to take a look at, because this talks to some of the concerns that I've had with mathematics, and knowing that, as a former science and math teacher myself, some people don't see themselves as math people, and that sort of just exacerbates as the kids get older, and they're more and more turned off, when now you're competing with everything else that they've got. It's the friend across the room, and I'm more interested in this, so it's trying to find validity for mathematics for them. And we are definitely going to be addressing this going forward in a way that, like, this district has never seen. I know Tom and I have had a lot of conversations. I've had a lot of sleepless nights, I go home on weekends and, you know, I love my husband, he thinks I'm sitting there on the couch like, you know, reading, you know, novels and I'm like researching stuff. It's just, it is bothering me that we cannot close this fast enough because we want our kids to be ready for whatever they're facing out there. And math is not just about mathematics, it's also about a way to think critically and to think about problem solving. Right now you might be using numbers, but you could be faced with some other sort of a situation where maybe you're doing traffic detail and now you need to redirect traffic. Can you creatively think how to do that? It's about the thinking, and I wanna make sure that we're really preparing our students to think in a lot of different ways.
And and it's also, I think one of the big pushes I've made probably in the last 2 years with teachers, definitely in the last year with the math teachers, is, how do I word this? Well, maybe I just need to say it bluntly. Letting our kids fail and learning from failure, because our kids, and again, I'm generalizing, they struggle to just, when they're doing math problems, take some initiative and try something. It's okay if you don't get the right answer. Don't just look at it and say, I need help, I can't do anything without help. You've got to persevere and try something, right? And that especially, we have a couple math teachers in particular that have really taken to some of the work that Tom's been pushing with the workshop instruction model to really push the kids even more in that vein to say, oh, you can ask questions, but I'm not here to give you the answers, just clarifying questions. I'm gonna check back with you in 5 minutes. I wanna see that you made some progress. So that's a flip that we haven't had, I think, in recent years, is the focus on the instructional piece and how that connects to some of those different content areas. That's new, and I think that is also gonna help our kids who are a little gun shy as to how they're gonna approach a math problem. They're just waiting for somebody to say, what's the formula? What's the steps you want me to take? Well, no, you need to figure that out. That's part of being a good problem solver.
Do you want me to talk about the math PLC now, because it's kind of a natural segue, even though it's not?
Sure.
Does kind of fit.
I kind of thought this was later in the agenda, but I'll do it
Yeah,
now.
That's fine.
I went to the math PLC at the high school recently, and I just said to them, you know, I certainly recognize that Mr. Stack has hired a math interventionist for the purpose of helping with math scores. And I just asked them the open-ended question, you know, if you had a clean slate and you could do whatever you need to do to fix this, what would it be? Because I want to hear from them, right? I mean, they're on the front line teaching every day, and I want to know what I need to do as a superintendent to align resources or time or effort or energy to help them. And they were great. We had a very productive, positive conversation, and the things that came out of it were not really a big surprise. One is that there's a concern about the scope and sequence of math from grades 9 to 11, that they're not getting to certain aspects before they have to take the SAT. So we had a conversation about whether or not freshmen need to be taking algebra. I mean, 8th graders need to be taking algebra 1. Because the reality is that if you don't take algebra 1 as an 8th grader, you don't complete algebra 2 before you take the SAT. And I explained to them that I have a really high expectation for standardized testing in academics. And I explained to them that, you know, even if you went with, Michael Trammell recently sent me an email from not NHLI, but Reaching High New Hampshire. And it talked about socioeconomics and academics and the correlation between socioeconomics and academics. I'm not saying that I agree or disagree with the article. I'm simply saying that if one does agree with the article, let's just say that you do, then we should have 85% of our kids at grade level. Because we have 15% of our kids have free and reduced lunch. And I explained that to the math department. I said, I'm not upset with you or anything like that, but our scores are abysmal and they have to be fixed. It's that simple. They have to be fixed. And we are going to do whatever it takes to fix it. And you, as a team, to the math team, are going to come up with a plan and present that plan to the school board, because you're the ones on the front line. So you're going to come up with a plan. Brian and I are going to support you. And then we're going to bring that plan to the school board, and they were fine with that.
Is any algebra taught in eighth grade? I thought we used to do it.
We do, but it's not a mandatory course, it's for the advanced students. So I want it to be a mandatory course.
I can't, sorry.
It's okay. It always was that Algebra 1 was taught in freshman
But
year.
if they don't get algebra 1, there's no point in giving them any math after that.
Right, you have to do Algebra 1, but
I mean,
it's
really.
important to recognize that it used to be for many, many decades that was freshman math.
Yep.
And we are saying we need it to be eighth grade math. But we also did talk about, they've done some really good things. I think it's important to celebrate the hard work of our staff. So I want you to hear a few things that are really positive. The first one is that they recognize there's a problem. That's not a problem. And that's a big deal. You and I know, Jamie, that for organizational change, awareness is the beginning of change, right? If people don't admit that there's a problem, you can't get anything done. So they recognize that this is a concern, and they have already taken steps to align components of the curriculum so that they're being addressed prior to that junior year to try to strengthen certain areas with the SAT. They also recognize that that using data to inform instruction is something that they haven't done as good a job of and that they need to do more of. So they need to look at those. It's one thing to know what the NWEA score is. It's another thing to change what you're teaching based on what's in the NWEA score. And those scores are powerful, but unpacking it is very time consuming. So Patty has gone to some PD and is going to bring in some professional development to teach teachers how to unpack it and apply it, which then the math interventionist will unpack it and apply it. So it can't just be, I think this kid needs X. It needs to be, this kid needs X because they haven't performed on these assessments, and so we're going to give them extra help in that. Not just, okay, we've taught this unit and we're done. If you didn't get it, you can get a B. That's the part about competency ed that I love, is that the seat time is the variable. The learning is the constant. The problem with some of the work is that we are up against, and I'm not going to deny in any way, our country is having a problem with math. This is not just Sanborn. It's everywhere. And I want to be clear that our scores on the SAT are statewide are abysmal. I don't care about the state average. The state average is fine, we can talk about it, and that's a good goal. It's way too low, right? I don't want our kids scoring 47% on anything. So I just want to be clear about that the state average is fine, but that's an average. The main average is also 38% for hundreds of thousands of kids. So this is a curriculum issue that we're going to tackle. If we tackle this well and are successful with it, it's a big deal. So I just want everyone to understand what we're taking on. We're taking on a national issue. And if we can successfully solve this problem, that will be pretty darn impressive. Okay, so if we're up for a game here, it's going to be a big game, and this book is the start of the big game.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to ask our math teachers to read it, and we are recognizing as a team, our team, that elementary teachers organically struggle with math. So can I just take a quick second and take a look at the left column? Tammy, in light of your point that we should look at all the data, if you look at the left column, I'm very, very impressed that our
Which column is
You mean the ELA?
the ELA column,
ELA.
right?
Okay.
If you look at grade 8, in 1 year that it was 72%, and the next 3 years it was up in the 69 and 65%. We are in the hitting zone there to getting to 80%. Right now, in my head, the way I think about data is this. The very best that most fully inclusive public schools that include all special ed kids and everyone in their data can get is 10% of students a couple of levels below grade level, but making a year's growth, right? So you might be below the benchmark, but you're making a year's growth or more. 5 to 10% are one level below and still making a year's growth, and then everyone else is at grade level. That is the absolute most that I would expect of a public school system globally. Now, do I want to see way better than that? Yeah, in K2 in particular. Because if we don't teach them well in K2, you lose not only the year's growth, but you lose every year's growth if you don't access the curriculum at the point at which you're reading to learn instead of learning to read. So pre-K to 2, you're learning to read. Grades 3 to 12, you're reading to learn. And if you don't get up to speed by the end of second grade, the research shows clearly that it's all downhill from there. So I think it's really important for us as a team to look at the data of what happened to some of our kids that aren't doing well. And I'll task the administrative team with this work to bring to you, which is what happened to those kids that are in the 35% that aren't doing well in grade 8? What did they look like in grade 2? Right? What's the trend there? And what I'm looking for there is holes in the curriculum, backward planning. So if we see that a number of those kids didn't do well in second grade on X, then we're gonna beef that up in the curriculum. That's the next level of work. I just want everyone to understand that there's 3 layers to improving our academic performance. Number 1, it's getting rote skills down as soon as possible, and that's the academic intervention for reading and math, because math has sight words, multiplication, division. You gotta just practice those. There's no other way to do it but to do it. Just like the first 50 sight words, you have to memorize them or you can't read fluently, right? That's just practice. We can have teachers do that very quickly at the young grades. The second piece is then looking at the data to unpack it and align the curriculum and make sure that the curriculum addresses the gaps based on the student's performance, not based on a prefab curriculum. And then the third thing is really taking a look at each student's individual needs and increasing that engagement, which is the workshop instruction, right? The workshop instruction, the teacher talks for 10 minutes, and then the kids work at their just right level, which grows their engagement over time. As we look at this data, if we support the literacy program the way that I'm planning to, I think the literacy program is in good shape. It just needs to beef up those core skills. For math, I think we need a full-scale overhaul. That's what the data says to me when I read it. Math needs a full-scale overhaul. Literacy needs some good, solid intervention adjustment. And I open that up to any of you as to whether or not you agree or disagree. I'm just saying that's my opinion from a global perspective about what this data is telling us. Basically in math, we're struggling hard, and in reading, we're almost there. Thoughts?
I would absolutely agree. I mean, ELA, the reading writing, needs just a little bit more support. We will get the kids to where they need to be. Math, we are all over the place, and it's about developing some of those core skills, the fluency with the skills, with the facts, being able to use those, being able to identify when it's time to use some of those skills, make sure that the teachers are comfortable with that. That's a whole other component. And definitely spending more time on looking at the data. What are these tests telling us? What does this mean? This is a different number than I give in this test. In some scores, it's a 3-digit number. In some tests, different kind of tests, it's a 2-digit number. Here it's a letter. What does all of this mean? How does that translate to our students? And, getting that information, and then also, and I know that this is also on the agenda, but looking at how that's going to translate into the grade reporting for parents and helping them understand what their child is doing so that they can have a bigger role and a better understanding of, what they can be doing at home to help out. It's a lot. And we're in the middle of a reorganization, so yeah, there's a lot going on.
It's all good. Excited. Can't wait. In terms of the report, Tammy, do you have what you need for the purpose of the report? I know that Patty will help write it.
Annual report?
Yeah,
I did
I
it.
saw that.
I did
You're
it.
all set? Okay.
That's my piece, so,
Okay, good.
yeah, no, it's done. Phyllis has it,
Okay, and I wrote
That's
mine,
excellent,
and
thank
Pete's is
you.
done, so,
it's all done.
good.
That's just a couple weeks away, actually, so.
I know.
It's unbelievable.
It came
All
up
goes
so
to the printers
fast.
tomorrow.
Came up quick.
Okay, thank you for doing that.
So a couple of comments.
Sure.
So just 2 of the things that Tom had talked about, I want to comment on. One is algebra 8th grade. I completely support that. I think it does 2 things. One is you're not just teaching the kids algebra. It's a exercising of the brain. It is
A way to think.
forcing uses of a thought process that kids need to be thinking through. Patty, you had mentioned similar.
Way to
It's
think.
not just about the math.
That's right.
When back in days of yore, they would have taught logic and things of that nature as part of the overall liberal education. We don't do that so much anymore with logic. But math is probably the closest thing to that, of a rigorous exercising of the brain in areas that are needed. So I think that would be very helpful, and it would also help to hit the wall. The only comment you talked about, the best possible you could get from an education is the rest at grade level. My only exception to that would be some should be above grade level.
Oh, there are, there's a huge part, yeah,
Some should be
absolutely.
above grade level.
Yeah, I'm
We should
sorry,
have
thank
some
you.
type of a bell curve.
Is there a target? Do you have a target
No,
percentage?
no, and but the point is that you are going to have an organic component of the population that's 2 or 3 levels above grade level.
Yep.
And they are just as important, and I also wanna illustrate the level to which I agree with you is that that's what my wife does for a job. She teaches gifted children, so in Maine, they have gifted and talented programming. Here, what we're going to do is we're going to use the workshop model. When kids are working at their just right level, the kids should be accessing. It's really tricky in 3rd grade when you can read at an 8th grade level because you have to find the appropriate material for the kid to read emotionally and mentally at that reading level. So it's really, this is tricky, right? But the reality is that that is addressed thoroughly in the workshop model. And yes, there are kids that are, when I say at, I apologize, I usually say at or above grade level.
I knew
That's my
probably what
usual
you meant,
language.
but
Thank
it
you,
wasn't
Jamie,
your
for the
language.
camera and the- yeah, I know, thank
Now, if we
you.
just get everybody
I
at
did
grade
make a
level,
mistake.
we're all happy.
Yeah, no, at or above.
But in the most extreme example, we have a young man who's gonna graduate this year, he's finished Calc 3, right? Multivariable, so that's pretty significant.
I had a
I've
7th
not
grade,
seen that in a while here.
I had a
That's
7th
impressive.
grade student who was being bused to the high school to take AP calculus in 7th grade.
Mhm.
It happens. Her parents were mathematicians. It was just the way they lived.
Anything else on that before we?
Oh, yes, one other thing. Those really, really high kids are just as likely to drop out as the really, really low kids. And we need to take them very seriously. And it is very, very important because they are usually the ones who are creators and innovators. And if we lose them, you can lose them to depression and anxiety. And they usually have a hard time socially. So we need to take that very seriously. People focus on the kids that struggle, but the kids that are in the really, really high blue zone, so to speak, blue, green, yellow, and red, the blue kids are just as much of a concern. And I only know that because my wife that's what she does. She talks to me about it a lot.
Okay. We have an agenda item to discuss the AP program that we started discussing at our last meeting a month ago. We have about 15 minutes left. So I'm gonna recognize myself first, and I'm going to my comments would be regarding the prerequisites and the sort of ground rules that you're creating to allow kids into the classes. And I would just stress that there should be some communication with the parents. If there's a teacher, there should be not sole reliance on the teacher's recommendation, would be my suggestion. And if you have a teacher who is not recommending a student, there should be some feedback to the parents on that, and the parents should have, I think, some ability to appeal that decision. There should be some process for appealing.
There is.
I can tell you that I know of an example of a child who was not a student, who was not recommended for AP literature, I believe it was, when he was a sophomore. His parents appealed, he took the class. He wasn't doing badly in his sophomore English class. There was other reasons, I think. He scored a 3 on the test, went on to major in, double major in English as a college student. I'm just saying, please don't solely rely on the teacher. There are other situations, there are other reasons, unfortunately, why teachers might not recommend students.
Sure.
Right now, we're in the process, we just started course registration this week, and the process is that the teachers make recommendations and put those into the computer, and then the students go in and they add in their electives, and then we print something up and send it home to the parents, so that the parents have to sign off on all of the courses that are recommended, and if the parents don't agree, then there's the option to get in touch with the student's counselor, and then there's a conference between the teacher and the parents. So parents are absolutely given input given the opportunity to override a teacher's recommendation. We have forms for that, so definitely we have the parents' input into the students' levels of
Is that
courses.
done prior to any, meeting that the students, I don't know if this is done anymore, but at the time there was the students, that were selected for the AP class were sent off to meet with the teacher. There, at that time, I think there was a summer assignment actually. And so gave out the summer assignment and described it. And this particular student that I'm aware of was excluded from this. That's how he found out that he was not recommended for the class.
Yeah,
It wasn't a good situation.
Yeah.
It doesn't sound like it, and
Sure.
that wouldn't happen now. And we're doing, like I said, we're doing the course selection now. Parents will sign, they'll receive a letter in the mail on the week of February 10th with their kids' courses, and then we start to build the schedule. And then those meetings with AP teachers happen at the end of May, right before kids leave for the summertime. So, yeah, there's definitely plenty of time for conferencing with teachers, and honestly, every teacher is having a conference with their students, so in the core classes, so English, math, science, foreign language, some social studies classes, but the teachers are meeting with each individual student to conference with them about what course they want to take next in that, and this is something new that we've started the last couple of years, so that students and teachers are deciding together based on, how things have gone, what is the student interested in, what are their post-secondary plans, what does the teacher recommend, and then that is put in, and then, like I said, parents have the ultimate say. Yeah.
Yes.
Question, kind of goes off something that you said, talking about the summer work requirement. So I know we started talking about that at the last meeting. This was, I think, Bob's idea originally to talk about how we could beef that up. Is that something that this group would be supportive of us moving forward with? And the reason I say that is because it would come with, I think, a dollar amount that we would have to attach to that and fund in order to compensate teachers to do some additional work over the summer. Because what so just to catch everyone up, if you weren't here last time or don't remember, it's one thing to say, we're gonna give you the summer assignment, here it is in June, it's due on the first day of school. What we're looking for is something that'll be a little bit larger than that, where the teacher can have some check-ins with kids throughout the summer, so that there's an expectation that they're doing some work throughout the summer, and then they're producing it at the end. And that, in some ways, might even give us another data point over which kids are gonna be able to or not be able to be successful with AP rigor, right?
So-
They have to demonstrate it throughout the summer in like an online setting.
So before the board or before the committee asks anything, I know exactly what they're gonna ask you, which is, we can't approve something like that without an actual dollar amount.
Yeah,
So like,
yeah.
what would the cost be, how many teachers, how many
Correct.
hours, you need to bring a proposal to the board, but I also would like to echo that, I would like to see some summer reading or summer work for honors as well. So I don't want it to just be AP, but we'll start with AP to get it rolling.
Yeah.
But I wanna talk about honors courses having summer expectations, and I also wanna echo, what Tammy said, which is, if you have a summer program and parents can opt kids in, the whole point of what I've been saying about our AP program is that AP needs to be a true AP pace and expectations. If you're in it because your parents put you in it against teacher recommendation, fine, but if you can't cut it by October, you need to drop out because we're not slowing down. Right? We're not slowing down AP. If you don't do your summer work and you show up to school, you're out.
Yep.
It's that simple. Because you're already slowing down the whole group organically. The teacher cannot grade your work late and do it and be successful. And I don't mean to sound cold or callous, but there's no, AP is accelerated for, it really is supposed to be for students that have a passion in that area. That's the purpose, is that you are accelerated and passionate about biology. You're accelerated or passionate about physics or whatever. It's not supposed to be, I just want this to pad my transcript, right? It's supposed to be that this is an area of excellence and acceleration. Honors also is supposed to be, this is something that I'm passionate about. I care about this topic. Now, I could see a kid I used to have high school students take a full schedule, all AP classes. I don't know how they did it. And they would do it, and they would pass. I don't know how they did it. It was a miracle. But the reality is that most of our kids should be able to take honors, but I also expect the honors expectations to be honors. Like you're serious about this subject area, and we'll talk about that more next year. I don't wanna change too much at once, but I want everyone to have a preview.
And it's not a huge dollar amount.
No.
We talked about that last time. I think you had said, somewhere it probably would be in the ballpark of 5,000 or 6,000, right? Depends on the teacher, but not a huge amount about contact hours, but just enough to be able to say, it can be four or 5 times this summer where you're required to submit work that you'll get feedback on, or have like take an online class, you get like a discussion board you're required to post so many times. So, those would be the kinds of expectations we'd be looking at. And we put a proposal, it's been a long day. We can put a proposal together pending the support of this committee for review, but I don't wanna do that without having that discussion.
So you're looking for like a straw poll.
That's it, yeah.
Well, let me ask you this, an AP teacher usually has regular classrooms and AP classrooms? Is there a minimum number of kids in the AP? I'm not interested in a year-round school.
Yep.
And that's what I hear you saying. Honors should be honors school year. AP, if you need to do some things to prep for it, that's a different ballgame. So is there a minimum number in the class? Does a teacher have only AP classes, or does he or she have 3 regular classrooms and 2 AP? In which case, your stipends are different than it would be for a regular classroom teacher. You see where I'm
Yeah,
going
so
with
we-
that? If you got 10 kids for an AP class, if there are 6, that's a problem.
Yeah. So there's 2 ways to answer that question. One, contractually, if we're gonna ask them to perform work, it doesn't matter whether there's 1 kid or 20,
Yeah,
we've
I
gotta pay
agree.
them
I understand
for their
that.
time. But the flip side is, we don't have to run courses that have below a certain number of students,
Correct.
right? So those are
That's
the
where I'm
2 things.
going.
And I don't think any of us are suggesting year-round school, but what I think we are thinking is there's an opportunity, because the AP curriculum is significant, there's a lot to it. There could be an opportunity, not so much for remediation before AP, but really to get the kids started in AP, and they almost do the first unit, let's say, as self-paced, independent work with teacher direction, so that by the time the AP class starts, theoretically, they're already a unit ahead. So they buy themselves time as they get closer to the spring when it's crunch time for the content.
I guess from my perspective, you got the 10th, 11th, and 12th grades. At this point, I don't wanna invest there. That's my
Yeah,
personal.
Sure.
I think we need to look at the total program from the beginning. Invest in the elementary, which we've done with the intervention already, grades through 8. Am I correct in that? Tom?
Yes, you're
Yep.
correct, yep.
Right.
You got it.
That to me is huge, extremely important. But maybe we need to look at putting it, going back to when we used to have Algebra 1 in the 8th grade as the norm. You could have 2 levels of Algebra 1, you might need a secondary. Grasping that concept is probably the most important mathematical skill we can teach them.
Yep.
The idea to conceptualize the meaning of transferring 1 to a 4 or to an A or B, C.
Sure.
That is more important to me, is seeing that elementary, the middle school, especially now that's gonna be right down another corridor.
Yep, true.
You
Yeah.
have a lot of opportunities to implement that 8th grade Algebra 1, because everything else is meaningless.
For one of our 2 sending schools. Just
You
saying.
can't control
We
free
still
will.
have another sending
Well,
school that,
but
I'm
we
just
need
saying.
Their
talk about
kids,
it.
But
their
they
kids won't
come
be
up.
able to keep up then.
And they come,
And
they
that's a whole
participate.
nother issue.
Yeah.
But I can't worry, we shouldn't worry about Fremont, you need to worry about Sanborn.
Absolutely.
Well, so just to echo that, I think what Brian needs to do is to put together a proposal. I don't think this is gonna cost very much money, but we do need to have prerequisites over the summer for AP. What that looks like, we can work on and decide. Might be
I
4
don't
hours 3 times over the summer. Might not
AP
be
to
much.
me is another animal. You
It
start
is.
talking honors now, I'm thinking you're talking year-round school. I'm
Yeah,
not
no,
into
no
Yeah.
year-round school. That's not what I'm saying.
that.
I am
We
saying-
should have honors classes no matter what.
Right, but what I'm saying is that any high-level course in our high school should have summer reading or summer work how that's
Yes.
looked at, whether it's collected the first day of school. I think for AP, what Brian is proposing is that they check in with the kid 2 or 3 times over the summer. I kind of have a general sense of what that's gonna cost, and it's peanuts.
It is.
Any-
I just wanna be clear about that,
Any
but
high school will have some rigor over this, have summer reading.
we have
some-
nothing,
And we have nothing.
nothing. When I
And-
found
and
out, I
they
was
don't-
about,
And other schools don't compensate.
no, they do,
Yeah, they do.
they do. If
It is,
You
it does
cannot- you
become a
cannot-
labor issue.
you cannot- you cannot-
If you're monitoring AP in the summer, that's one thing.
Right,
If you're giving him a reading list,
Right.
uh-uh.
there's a
Correct.
difference, and that's the
Yes.
question that we need to work out. There are some AP courses where you're just expected to read the books and write a paper and show up on the first day. We're wondering if we need to check in with them a couple of times over the summer to make sure that everything's moving forward, and that's the question before this committee.
I'm
And,
not opposed.
and you just, like, my kids attend a different school district that will tell you that all kids get summer work, right? I watched my 8th grader do his math summer assignment, made a big deal about how they've added all these summer assignments for kids. My 8th grader did his entire summer assignment in about 45 minutes the day before we went back to school. Now, he's got some work ethic issues, and I make that very public. Sorry, buddy. But, no, but, and not all my kids are that way, but that's my point. So we can have that expectation, but we want something neat,
You
right?
need to have some rigor. If you don't raise the bar soon, you'll just stay in the toilet.
I agree, yeah.
I know Jamie has commented. Sorry.
He's been very patient.
Thank
Just have me
you.
on the
I'm
show.
sorry if I
Just
jumped
to,
over.
to let you know where my head's at. I absolutely support AP. We did give some estimates last time, and they were, not huge sums whatsoever. I think that makes a lot of sense. If somebody wants to be taking that next step up, then we need to step up. That's part of it. I would support reading and other, type of summer activities for honors. Heck, I'd support it for everybody. I mean, there's absolutely nothing wrong when kids are leaving in June for the summer that, and you have to read 2 books, and you give them a list of names, and they come back and they've had read the 2 books. You don't need to check in with them, you don't need to pay anybody to do it. It gives, you know what, there's rainy days and there's days when their friends aren't around. There's days when their friends are around and they're being jerks. It gives kids something to say, okay, well, I can do this. And for that group of people that actually go through and do it, that's a good thing for them. That will help them. For those that don't, you start knowing, all right, the people that didn't, you're probably going to have more difficulties with them achieving grade level than the ones that did. It might be a first indicator that they are not liking reading, not capable of reading, have something going on that prevents them from reading. I don't have any issue. I don't think it turns into a all-year school. I certainly wouldn't support all-year school, but a reasonable take-home from June that's deliverable in September makes sense to me. I've seen many districts do that.
I wanna get it to the point where they ask for it.
I wouldn't hold your breath on that one.
I did it. We had 1st graders coming into school from kindergarten. And the first thing they said to the teachers is, can I please have my book box that I picked out at the end of kindergarten? I wanna read my new books.
Tom, you know better than me, it's a whole different animal in the elementary level.
But it starts there.
It
starts there.
It does start there.
A love for reading is a culture. A love for reading is a culture.
Yes.
There's a middle school principal in New York City who said to the kids, if you all read X number of books by this date, it was an insane amount of books, you can go to the premiere of Hunger Games at the movie theater. He had to buy out 4 movie theaters. 4.
Reading is not our problem.
It's a problem.
It's still low.
It's still low.
Could be better, but I think parents own a lot of this as well.
Well, and this,
I'm not disagreeing with that.
this gives, it's not gonna work for everybody. Nothing in life works for everybody. But it would give some kids that are more self-motivated, well, I know that the teachers wanted this done anyway, so even though there's nobody else at home that goes and buys those summer math workbooks or whatever, and makes them sit down every single day just to punish them during the course of the summer.
What was that?
Good luck getting my son to do math. I'm sorry.
Sounds like someone I know.
Yeah, it would give some of those kids the ability to say, well, you know what, I know that this is something they wanted at school, so I'm just gonna do this during some downtime.
There are children that would do that.
Many.
I said 14-year-old to try to take pre-algebra over the summer on the E.I.S.A, so I'm right there with you, Jamie, I got it. I got it.
That works.
Well, I am supportive of the summer, a summer assignment for AP. I would be supportive of providing resources to oversee AP.
And once you start posting summer assignments, you can do a lower grade, you have it on the computer, everybody's on there anyways.
Calisthenics is 7.
I just spent 5 days with a 14-year-old. It was almost a weird form of torture. There was no one else around to talk to him. He had to grunt at me. 14-year-olds are tricky.
They grunt through his phone.
They are.
Do we have anything else on AP? We are definitely past our
I
time.
do, I carved out the program of studies piece, which is the description of AP that actually went out with the program of studies, which is on the website now. And all of the course descriptions are APs. This is just selected pages. So if you wanna see where we currently are at, which does require, students failing to complete the work will be dropped from the course and reassigned. So that's in the program of studies. We can always go back from that if we really want to, but that's the current status of what we're thinking right now.
Thank you.
So that's, like I said, just certain pages. If you wanna see the whole thing, it's on the website right now.
It is, yeah, on the high school page, on the left-hand side, quick links. Actually, last year's and this year's, so
Yeah.
you can even see the change in the language, they're both on the website.
And how much that year.
Is this an homage to the,
I thought I'd show Mr. Chinberg's new apartments in the front.
If you wanna take the next time.
Do you have a personal interest in
I know,
those also?
we're running out of time.
Actually, I will tell you this, Eric and I played high school soccer together.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, he was a year older than me in
How
school,
about
so.
that?
Eric
I'm
and I played
retiring
together.
with that.
I'm gonna go down and see him. I assume he's here at 6.
On Facebook.
I've read some comments.
Yeah.
See the one I put on there this morning where I'm like, you do that again?
Never lost to Sanborn, I can tell
We're not
you.
adjourned yet. We're not adjourned yet, guys.
Oh, I'm sorry, Tammy,
We're
I'm sorry.
still here. We're going to table agenda item number 4, grade book system report, until our next meeting. Is there any public comment before we adjourn?
No, please just go ahead.
Do we have time?
Well, okay, first of all, my heart was breaking reading some of these fall-offs and some of these scores, and I'm so happy to hear that the administrators share that feeling, and I know that your board members do, and that you're coming up with specific steps to really look into what happens and why. It's been something which has been heartbreaking and very obvious that there's been a break and a wall between 8th grade and high school for a long time, and that the real fall off is right there, and I'm so glad you're doing that. I think that having summer assignments for everyone is at least options in both math and English is really important. Kids forget math over the summer, and would give parents a track to run on, should they choose to do so. Gives kids a track to run on, should they choose to do so. And for the ones who want honors and AP, absolutely should be required. So I'm really, love what you're doing. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Next meeting agenda, we'll do the grade book system report.
Actually, we will be timely, because we will have had that Motivus meeting.
We will just have had a
Week,
meeting, so I think there'll be
that'll be
quite a
helpful.
bit to talk about next time, yeah.
And you thought you hopefully will have something on the board for the
I
graduate?
can give you another update, yep, definitely, yep.
Okay.
Yeah,
Presents
make
from
sure that they
Patty.
get those,
Oh,
thank you.
Patty's a reader. Jamie's gonna love that book.
Anything else that I should put on your agenda?
You are, Jamie, we are, but you're gonna love it. Yep.
Some time.
I'm sure stuff will come up between now and then.
You think?
If anyone has
Just a few
anything.
things.